Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee to order for September 5th, 2025, and I'll now proceed with the land acknowledgement. I'd like to recognize that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Host Nation. The peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. Ottawa Police Service Board honors the peoples and lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nations, Inuit, and
His video had been frozen, so he must be having connection issues.
Am I live again?
Yep.
Okay. I'll continue with apologies. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Ottawa's Indigenous community is diverse, representing many nations, languages, and customs. The Ottawa Police Service honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and their valuable past and present contributions to the land. Completely appropriate cautionary technical difficulties. We're currently broadcasting on Zoom and live streaming on YouTube. Given this meeting is being held electronically, I want to caution that there's a possibility of technical difficulties. I want to have confirmation of the agenda. The confirmation agenda that the Ottawa Police Service Board's Finance and Audit Committee confirmed the agenda of the September 5th, 2025 meeting. Is the agenda confirmed?
Confirmed.
Confirmation of minutes that the Ottawa Police Service Board's Finance and Audit Committee confirmed minutes number 32 of the August 8th, 2025 meeting. Are the meetings confirmed?
Confirmed.
Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we have one item of business, which is the 2026 budget directions and timetable. Chief, I'll turn this item over to you and your staff for the presentation, followed by questions and discussions by the committee.
Thank you, Chair. We already have the shared document in the presentation. Is everybody let in there? Deputy Bell, is your team all in there? I don't see Bill Merklinger.
We need Bill Merklinger.
Okay.
He's the only other person we need admitted, please.
Okay.
We cannot see him in the attendees. I'm not sure if he's connected.
Bill, sorry, Steve. Bill's going to be sharing with me. He's here.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. So good morning to most of the board. It looks like most of the board is here. That's great to have everyone here. We are in budget season, of course, and we've been working obviously for a number of months on this topic, developing a budget to present to the board later, a budget recommendation to present to the board later this month. Of course, FAC preceding that. So we have a presentation completed by Deputy Bell, our CFO, Director of Finance, and the team, just to outline to you what's coming and what we've been doing and what we're looking at for some numbers. So Deputy Bell, over to you to guide us through the presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Chief, and good morning, everyone. So what we want to do today is we want to provide you an update with the progress we've made so far along building our budget, driving right now towards a budget direction report later this month. So what I want the board to know is that all the work we've done aligns with the strategic plan that the board has developed and adopted. So in that, we'll spend some time outlining the work we're doing, as well as talking about the city direction and recommendation that has come out earlier this month. So next slide, Mike. So as I indicated, the direction from the city has come out on September 2nd. Finance and Corporate Services Committee identified a city budget direction and recommendations to board. It was specific to the police in terms of a recommendation between 2.9 and 6.5%. I know the board is well aware of this, but as the city provides their directions, They only provide recommendations to any of the boards. So that's the Public Health Board, the Library Board, and the Ottawa Police Services Board. And it's ultimately the board's decision what the direction to the service is to build. As you can see, it's between 2.9 and 6.5% for us, with a 1.6 assessment growth for new properties. Of note, the 1.6% assessment growth is a 0.1 above what we've included in our forecast, and John will relate you to our forecast several times as we go through this presentation. The other thing of note that came out in the directions or recommendations report was the need for the police service to build an efficiency plan. And we're happy today to lay out the efficiency plan that we're working on further developing and will be implementing. So I think it's important to give context of how we come into this budget build. And I think the best place to start is our last year's budget, where we tabled a 3-year forecast that identified a 10.6% budget increase anticipated for 2026. So there's a big gap between a 6.5 ceiling from budget recommendations and the 10.6% we've forecasted. And that's currently where most of our work is, to see how we can try and lessen or close that gap. Most of the pressures that are included in that 10.6% budget forecast are related to pre-existing commitments, like the collective agreement, like contractual obligations we have with service providers. So it makes it challenging as we go through trying to close that gap. But I can let you know that we've already been engaged with the city treasurer to look at what are some ways that we can work together to collectively attempt to reach that recommendation that's been made. Next slide, and I will turn it over to John Sweet, who will actually start to go through some of the numbers.
Thanks, Deputy, and good morning, Chair and members of FAC. So as the Deputy mentioned, the 10.6 police tax increase scenario is the initial planning figure that OPS is utilizing, and is consistent with what was forecasted for 2026 in the 2025 budget. This slide is providing a percentage breakdown view of the various categories that are contained in the 10.6% scenario that was included in the 2025 budget as a forecast for 2026. I just wanted to point out that these figures do not reflect the recent budget recommendations from the city. We'll start with the various categories quickly. The maintained services category includes the contract settlement increases to salaries and benefits, year 3 of the staff stabilization plan, and an inflation provision for the goods and services that the OPS purchases, and results in a 9% increase for this category, with the contract settlement pressure accounting for 6.7% of that increase alone. The growth category includes an increase of 2.3% for 50 additional resources, which includes additional resources to keep up with the population growth in the city of Ottawa. The new services category includes funding for the interim and permanent training facility requirements, and a provision for strategic projects, which includes funding for body-worn cameras. This category requires an investment of 1.4%. All of the investments previously mentioned are partially offset by annual efficiencies that the OPS is able to undertake and revenue increases. Those account for a reduction of 0.3% each, for a total of a 0.6% reduction to the police increase. That all totals to an increase of 12.1% that is funded by a 10.6% police tax target increase, as well as a 1.5% assessment for the assessment growth increases. I will now pass the PowerPoint over to the CFO.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. So this slide outlines the next steps in OPS's 2026 budget directions and development. As you can see, the budget directions report will be presented at the September board meeting. The OPS will prepare a 2026 budget that reflects fiscal constraints and our service needs. The OPS will also begin a 4-year plan through 2027-2030 in next year, in 2026, in order to align with the board's strategic plan. And this approach will align with the city strategy, as they also are introducing a more structured 4-year planning cycle. In doing this, OPS planning will consider long-term demand scans, such as the facility's strategic plan and capital requirements. Also, an efficiencies approach will be taken, and I'll describe that on the next 2 slides. Thank you. So at the request of the city, OPS staff will develop a 4-year budget and an efficiency plan in 2026 for the period 2027 through 2030. Based upon OPS efficiency initiatives already underway, as well as new initiatives emerging from our recent discussions with the city treasurer, the OPS efficiency plan will include the following. A span of control review to ensure affordable and effective supervision, initiatives to reduce OPS administrative costs and overhead through streamlining, continuing the freeze that was announced by the chief in June on discretionary spending across the service, increased use of special constables to provide cost-effective support, and an example of that is using special constables to decrease overtime in ident, reduce sick leave costs through wellness, scheduling, and improved supports. And then on the next page, I'll describe additional efficiencies plan for technology and capital. Thank you. So OPS will continue and a robust efficiency plan that with respect to capital and technology review. As we previously discussed in our meetings, OPS will apply technology to achieve outcomes in strategic projects and service delivery. The city has also asked OPS to consider a capital contribution deferral plan for at least the next year, and we will therefore manage near-term budget pressures, and we will also develop a plan for the 2027 budget. Also, lower fleet maintenance and fuel costs will be incurred or achieved through investing in telematics technology. As the city is doing, OPS will also undertake an IT efficiency review to be performed to find cost savings. And for example, this would be consolidating and optimizing software licensing. And then finally, OPS will leverage IT and analytics to enable service optimization and process improvements. I will now pass the PowerPoint back to John to discuss provincial and federal funding.
Thanks, Bill. So this next section of the presentation covers our provincial and federal funding that was secured by OPS last year. The Ottawa-Ontario agreement with the province included a 3-year agreement for $48 million for the city of Ottawa, of which the OPS is receiving $18 million spread out evenly over the 3-year period. The Parliament District Policing Program with the federal government included a 5-year agreement for $50 million. This funding is entirely dedicated to the OPS to carry out the additional policing responsibilities in the Parliament District. Both agreements provide augmented policing services for specifically designed programs that include quantifiable key performance indicators and financial reporting requirements to the upper levels of government. If the OPS does not incur the costs related to these specific programs, then the funding will not be provided by the upper levels of government, and therefore this additional funding is not able to be leveraged to offset pressures included in the municipal budget ask. Next slide, please. Thanks, Mike. So this slide provides an overview of the additional funding that was secured from the provincial government that was included in the 2025 budget. And just to reiterate that this additional funding has provided targeted financial and operational relief to the OPS for the specified initiatives identified. That being said, this additional funding is unable to be used to offset the collective agreement settlement pressure. As an example, expenses must be incurred on the new initiatives in order for the OPS to collect funding from the upper levels of government. The provincial funding is a 3-year agreement ending March 31st, 2027, and includes annual funding for 5 projects totaling just shy of $6 million a year. The funding contained hiring 30 more members to the OPS, broken down by 13 sworn and 17 civilian. The projects receiving funding from the province include the Alternative Mental Health Project, CORE, Market Safe, the Mounted Unit, and Project Complement, which is funding additional special constables for the OPS. The province is also committed to provide the OPS with funding through the Joint Air Support Initiative for additional staff for the helicopter, but that agreement has not commenced yet and not reflected on this page. Next slide. So this slide provides an overview of the additional funding that was secured from the federal government that was included in the 2025 budget also. Similar to provincial funding, the federal funding must be used to offset the costs incurred in delivering services agreed to with Public Safety Canada and is unable to be used to offset other unrelated pressures that OPS is experiencing. The federal funding is a 5-year agreement ending March 31st, 2029, and includes annual funding for the delivery of the Parliament District Policing Program, which provides for the $10 million in funding per year. The funding contained hiring 49 more members to the OPS, broken down by 40 sworn and 9 civilian. Most of this funding is covering the cost for the sworn members that form the parliamentary resource teams that are providing the boots on the ground on Parliament Hill. Funding is also being provided to cover the cost for the chain of command for the additional staff, bolster the special events planning team and open source intelligence team, as well as reimburse the OPS for the police liaison team. I will now turn the presentation back over to Deputy Bell. Thank you.
Thanks, John and Bill. So now I want to focus on what's next. So we've given you the context of where we are right now and some of the activities that are ongoing. So what we hope is today we're going to receive feedback from the FAC committee to help guide us through our budget direction report. We'll continue to build and refine the budget we have, always with the eye on trying to close the gap between where we forecasted and where we currently sit and the recommendation that was brought forward by the city. We will also continue to meet with the city treasurer to look at some different ways of looking at how we fund to also close that gap. Ultimately, that will take us to September 29th, where we will table a budget directions report with the board and await your direction on what are the numbers that we build our budget around. So that's where we are right now, and we're looking forward to taking questions and having discussion around the board's thoughts on where we are and where we're going.
Thank you, Deputy John and Bill, for the presentation. I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to suggest that we do committee members first, and then we'll open up to any questions for other members of the board. So, Member Curry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this presentation. I think it's super helpful. I like the direction that I'm seeing with the work with the city and the possible sort of 4-year budget direction thinking, and the efficiencies plan to look at that. There's a model that we use at the city that I know you know about, but maybe people who are listening are not aware of, that Councillor Carr, myself, the mayor, sit on this committee, and we have pretty much all the departments from the city come and talk to us about efficiencies that they have found, ways that they can avoid costs, and also revenue generating opportunities. And it's a year-long committee. You know, we meet very often, get presentations, and it is a very, I think, collegial way to look at, are we considering everything? Have we thought of other ideas? It's very effective at the city. I know police is separate and different from the city. We are not, you know, a committee of the city, the Police Services Board, but the model that we have at the city, I think, is a good model. So I just would make that point. I really look forward to the work of that group, however that's going to be formed here. We have the union groups come in and talk to us. Like, everyone comes to this smaller committee that we have formed. So I would just say that I really am happy to see that. The other thing I would say is that I agree wholeheartedly that there are a number of things technology will help as we look for how we might be able to be more efficient, effective, save money, do things differently. So I think that there's never been a time in history where that might be more true. So looking forward to that. I would just challenge one thing, and I understand absolutely why the slides presented on the provincial funding and the federal funding say that this does not affect the municipal budget. I 100% understand why that has to be clear. These are separate pockets of money. The only thing I would challenge is that I do believe that because of that funding and because of those projects, there will be economies of scale. There will be impacts that help us in other ways. And I'm seeing the chief nodding. I don't think you're disagreeing with me. So I don't really mean to challenge in a harshly challenging way. I just would give 2 examples, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But if the thinking has been that the mounted unit, and we heard this during the convoy, can replace or can act as almost 15 to 30 officers because of the benefits of having a mounted unit. There's lots of benefits of a mounted unit, but if that is generally true, that it's not just one officer on one horse means one officer on one horse, that there's economies of scale just in its own being, then that does help us that we potentially need fewer officers at a big event because the mounted unit helps more than it actually is technically. So that's one example I would give. So, and then the other is the police liaison. So the federal money and the money for a police liaison team or officers. I think that too, and we were at a conference recently, almost the whole board, and listened to Peel talk about how their police liaison team was so effective in calming down a pretty significant protest and almost a riot, I would say, in the Toronto area. That then, if we have a really effective police liaison team, would then create better relationships with, various groups across our community, potentially reduce crime overall, then potentially reduce the need for more officers. So I just would challenge that I think there are some huge benefits from that federal funding, from that provincial funding, that then would help us in the budget that relates to the municipal budget funding. So I just would say that. And then the last thing I would say is that, when we look at the demand for police in whether it's rural communities, suburban communities that we haven't had before, I think people understand that. And they think, yeah, I'm happy with a higher ask from the police service because we need more officers in our communities. However, what we don't talk about enough is that we also don't have people staffed. We have some, but not enough in our human trafficking unit. I mean, this is something we don't talk about a lot because the people in the communities are mostly looking at what's happening in their communities. So a human trafficking unit needs to have more than 1 or 2 staff in it. Intimate partner violence unit needs to have more than 1 or 2 officers in it. The fraud division needs to have more than 1 or 2 officers. So these are, there's a much longer list. So I think that needs to be understood by the community when they see a higher ask from police, that it is not just the community policing model. It's these other areas that have not had enough staff, not enough attention. And so as a result, I don't have a problem with a higher ask because I understand where the reinforcements need to be. So those are my comments. I'm not sure if you have any comment on my comments, but that's my overall thinking. I'm really pleased to see this budget and all the other components of it.
Chief, do you want to respond?
Please, Chair. Thank you for your comments, Member Curry. Number of things there. Obviously, you had a lot of topics there. No, I agree. You're absolutely right. The provincial and federal funding is separate, and there's specific programs that we have to report on. But we absolutely hope that there are, some positive effects that will help our frontline folks, our investigative folks. And I think another example that is very relevant is the the parliamentary precinct, and having them and that presence downtown. They will take care of a number of the smaller demonstrations that we do get. Instead of pulling neighborhood resource officers, traffic unit from different parts of the city to help with those, they'll take care of them. I don't see it much as being a money saver as much as we can have our teams do their jobs instead of coming downtown. So I don't see less officers, which you didn't really indicate as well. But there's a number of examples where we hope, obviously the Byward Market funding on the province, that is one really direct investment that will help our frontline as they have more presence in the Byward Market in the core strategy. Hopefully will decrease calls for service for the front line as well too. So there are a number of touch points there. So totally agree with you. The one thing I will just say, I want to comment on the police liaison team. We do have and have had a very robust police liaison team. They've done a fantastic job. They are worth their weight in gold ×2 or 3. They really do build those relationships and resolve a lot of issues before they potentially could get out of hand. I wouldn't say it's much in terms of decreasing crime. I wouldn't say that is really an effect of the police liaison teams. They do focus on the protests and major events that are occurring and trying to make them safer, more organized, and of course, hopefully decrease some criminal behavior during a protest, perhaps. But I just wanted to give kudos to our team right now that they have been up and running and are doing very well. your last comment surrounding, the need for a more visible police presence in different parts of our city. Certainly, I've seen that. As you know, I've done my tour of the city councilor wards. I'm finishing it actually this afternoon. Is my last tour. So I'll say I'm nearly finished. And certainly the theme I've gotten from most overwhelming majority of councilor is we need more police in their particular wards, be it traffic, be it proactive presence, be it enforcement. But you bring up a very important part in terms of our investigative sections that also have not grown much or at all over the last 20 plus years. And their investigations are so much complex. I don't have the exact number, but and Trish unfortunately isn't here right now, but I would guess that 3 out of 5, maybe even higher, of our investigations involve some sort of data component where we need to download a cell phone or a laptop or a Facebook threats or Facebook comments or whatever the case may be. It is an endless amount of data that we have to now process that just adds on, along with the increased call volume that they have to get through to get a charge over to Crown. So certainly, I thank you for pointing out those investigative units, because it's not only about the visible presence of our members in uniform, but those investigative folks too. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Member DeRoche.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the team for the presentation. I've been here just a few months, but obviously following the police very closely in my role as city councilor as well. I will be making the case at council that the increase needs to be at the higher end. Obviously, the big pressure is the wage settlement that is really, really important. And I can validate what the chief said. When I go into my community, I hear that they want to have police presence in the community and not less. And I agree, we certainly need to do more as a city and as a province and as a country on homelessness and on mental health. But I don't think it's fair to suggest that that will solve all the problems and that criminality will go away. We still need to have an effective police force for the city, and in particular, given our role as the nation's capital and the number of protests that we have seen. I'm really interested in the efficiencies there. The police are not being singled out. We're doing efficiencies right across the city, as Member Curry has stated. And previously, Chief, you weren't able to meet, or the team wasn't able to meet the efficiency targets. How confident are you that the efficiencies that you identified here, the strategies identified, will produce results?
Thank you, Member DeRoche. I will pass this over to Deputy Bell for more discussion. Although I will say that a couple of things actually related to the comment Member Curry made about the process that they have at the city for finding efficiencies with different departments. Deputy Bell and I are meeting with City Hall in regards to that very topic. I believe it's next week. It's next week. And that's with the city manager, with the director of treasury, Cyril as well too. Can't remember his title there. I messed that up. To sort of go over what we're planning and what we're doing. I will say that the efficiency targets that were set and then not made, it's been very difficult as over the years, a lot of the back office, and I've talked about a lot of the units and areas that are in Deputy Bell's area, the IT, the finance, the HR, these areas that get whittled down can only get so small. We are a bit of a different animal that we do have to go to calls. We can't work from home. Our police officers, they have to be out there. So some of those efficiencies that can get met in some other areas are more difficult for us. But Steve, I'll just go over to you to talk a little bit more about our plan and finding some success there.
Thanks, Chief. So actually, I'll start with Member Curry and the comments she made around the efficiencies exercise. What I can tell you is that we're right in lockstep with the city treasurer. We've had most of our discussions that we've had around how to close the gap have been around what are some of the efficiencies exercises that we can launch. So to Member DeRoche's question, which I think is a really good one, we have in the past had practices of putting efficiency numbers on a budget because they made the budget work. We're really not doing that this year. We're actually identifying the areas of concern for us that we believe we can have some efficiencies, and making sure that we drive towards reasonable and realistic targets that will actually support the budget. We know in the past, as we've put larger numbers on our efficiency line, not meeting them creates year-over-year pressure, and that will absolutely not be the case this year. But we still do think there are areas to find efficiencies within the organization. That's why we've laid the 4 or 5 different areas out, because we know that there's work to do in them and that we'll see a real reward from them.
Okay, thank you for those answers. That's very helpful. As we go through this process and as you engage with the community and engage with ultimately with council, I think we're going to need some spotlights on some key things that I'll share today. One of them is, I think, a perception that the police service continues to benefit, thankfully, from federal and provincial funding, and yet we continue to have sort of financial challenges, and trying to understand how this is truly, these programs are helping us certainly focus on a particular area like the capital precinct, but deal with the question, please, on how this really isn't helping float the entire boat right across the system. I think you started to touch on it in the presentation, that it was really directed, but in other branches of the city, when we get federal provincial relief, often that kind of leads to some offsets, right? So I would just suggest, and you don't need to answer it today, that there just be some focus on how federal provincial funding is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily lead to solving kind of some of the financial challenges that we have. The second area where I think we need significant transparency as we go through these discussions is on the automated red camera lights and the revenue that we derive from that, or the OPS derives from that, just ensuring that we're transparent, that council was very clear that the funding that is shared with the police services board and the police service is to go towards the traffic operations. And I'm quite confident that you can do that, because I know you are active in the community and active across the city on traffic enforcement. We see that in your social media, but I think it needs an extra spotlight during the process. Ms. DC, I see you have your hand. I won't be the chair here, but chair, looks like someone has a comment, so I'll stand down for that.
I was waiting until you were finished. Deputy Bell, do you want to respond?
Thanks.
Yeah, so Member DeRoche, we heard loud and clear that as we went through the discussions with council on the ASC and the red light camera revenue. So one of the steps we've taken and we're currently engaged in is we are completely separating our traffic and road safety budget from being just mixed in with the rest of the budget, so we can clearly identify what initiatives we're undertaking and where all of our investments as a police services are around that. We're also then going to put a narrative to what the strategy around traffic and road safety is, so that we can clearly delineate that the money that we do recoup or do get from the city around those initiatives is clearly going to support traffic and road safety, so that there's no discussion or debate around how we are spending that money.
Good. That's good to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you for the comments today. As I said, I'll certainly do my part to advocate for the higher end of this budget. I do think it will be up to the police service to make the case. I think you're very capable of doing this. I think the chief is right. He's been across the city and he's heard that residents want effective policing. We've seen the number of protests and counter protests increase. Council's debated what we can do in that area, and many councillors are of the view that this should be permitted and enabled and encouraged. And so if you believe in that, then you need to have the proper services of the police to help ensure the safety, not just of the protesters, but of the public, and have roads that are open that don't harm business. We've seen some really awful increases in hate crimes. And again, I continue to hear there's a strong need to ensure that our traffic laws are being enforced, as well as some of the stunt driving that we have seen. So I think you're very capable of making the case, and I'll certainly make the case as well as this goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Member DeRoche. Member Carr.
Thanks very much. I don't know that I have anything additional to add. My colleagues covered off many of the points. I will echo Councillor Curry's point with respect to the efficiencies exercise in the group that we've been involved in. That particular group, there'll be a memo issued in the next couple of weeks before budget of all the efficiencies that we've worked on over the last couple of years. And I think that will really put into perspective how much work has been done on that group and where those efficiencies are. And I'm very happy to hear that we'll be working on something similar with the police. One thing that I didn't hear mentioned, and perhaps I just mentioned, was when making the case, the recent audit about the frontline deployment and the outdated targets. I think that's really important information in a city that is 2,800 square kilometers. Most of us recently attended the Canadian Association of Police Governance, and we're very well aware that not only are our targets for policing on the ground much lower than other major cities, but we're also aware about how far behind we are in technologies, for example, with respect to body-worn cameras. So I think those are really important things to highlight for a city of this size and of this geography. And having those contrasts between the amount of police available in other cities and our city, I think, is also something that is really important to mention. Councillor DeRoche mentioned, of course, we always hear, about the importance of social services and homelessness. But one thing that I hear about more and more is the impact that is had on vulnerable communities in terms of needing policing within those communities as well, and not just social services. Some of the new forms of crime that we're seeing, for example, the new jewelry thefts that are happening to seniors in my community, that are happening in the middle of the day when seniors are walking down a street. My small business in my area was the target of a smash and grab. These are more common, these jewelry thefts that are happening. We're also seeing, I've also met with folks that live in my ward but own businesses downtown where their businesses are suffering from the amount of vandalism and social disorder that's occurring on the street, and they're considering closing down their businesses. So I think it's also important for people to understand the impacts that are had on these vulnerable communities. When we see downtown, the human trafficking that gets into the most vulnerable circles, the drug trafficking, we often hear about the illegal drug supply and the impacts it's having on people from a public health. But I don't think public health officials are going to be able to track down and solve where that illegal drug supply is coming from. So I think highlighting that role of the OPS and the unique responsibilities it has with respect to our other partners is extremely critical. Councillor Curry brought up the fraud. That is something I hear from seniors all the time. When I had a shelter in my ward at Dempsey Community Centre, I met with a number of seniors there that were there because they were a victim of a fraud crime and lost their life savings. And I was very naive prior to that, understanding how much there is of that kind of fraud and how common it is. That was really quite surprising to me, that experience. So I do think, those things do need to be highlighted for people. I'll also say, as a member of the police board, I'm also aware of how much work the police board and the OPS have done on this. It's not always it's done behind the scenes. Both Councillor Curry and I and Councillor DeRoche participated in a number of city council committees and boards. The amount of work that has been done on this in figuring out the resources and the gaps is very, very extensive compared to most committees and boards that I serve on. So I am confident that the final product will be great, but I would like to see, focus on that. And also, Councillor DeRoche mentioned about the protest. I think it's important to highlight where the police have a role. They're the only ones that have a legislated function when it comes to public order, when it comes to some of these things. And I think really highlighting that unique role that police have to play 24/7 is also important. So thank you for this, and I look forward to seeing and supporting the final products.
Thank you, Member Carr. Member Curry?
Yeah, just based on my colleagues' comments, there's a couple of other things I thought I might mention here and ask about. So when we were at the conference this summer, we heard from other police services. It was very, very helpful to hear what other services were doing. And one service was giving a very specific example of a case where a person in their city had I think it was 15 interactions with police in a matter of like 3 hours. And they, there was definitely substance use, there was a mental health component to it, but they had been able to track the number of interactions this one resident had with police over the course of, as I said, like half a day. And then they were able to determine that, if they were able to get that person's supports, that would have reduced, 15 calls. It was actually shocking. But once they put their mind to that, that made a significant that reduced the number of police obviously involved and reporting and everything else that goes with every single incident in that half day period. So I'm wondering, when we talk about some of the technology, the slide that talked about the technology, do we already have that technology? Would we be better able shortly to do things like that? And my final part would be of that question is, or is the challenge that when we find that there is a person that is needing that type of support, we don't necessarily have anywhere to take that person for help?
Deputy Bell, you've got your hand raised.
So I'm going to defer to the chief to answer Councillor Member Curry's question first, and then I'll talk about some of the issues Member Carr raised.
Yeah, and thank you, and Deputy Burnett, I might even get you in on this one, just on the vulnerable side of the house. That the meetings that I've had with not only councillors in the last few months, but a lot of service providers, the downtown core and the number of vulnerable population that is now in the downtown core has risen significantly since spring, significantly. Yesterday, I had a meeting with a significant a business owner in the downtown core, and he's thinking about his next moves and what to do. And he owns a lot in the downtown core, and he's just doesn't know quite what to do. So myself and another police leader we're talking to him about next steps. But it's such a broad, this answer is half an hour. So I gotta figure out how to synthesize it. Our role in the downtown core, I've kind of come to a couple of conclusions. We have some processes in place, like our integrated community safety table, where we have a bunch of resources around, and we, metaphorically put an individual there. What can we do to help that person, that one person, and then strategize and go out. And they've had some successes. We have to continue doing that. But the bottom line is there isn't enough places that we can put these people. So then they say to police, okay, can you please deal with the open air, the open public drug use? And we now have some provincial legislation that allows us to do this more freely. We had it under the criminal code to begin with. But what do we do? Person doing that drug use, stop. We have that ability to do that. We can seize it from them. And now what do we do with them? They stand up and they go a block down and do the same thing, or they find more drugs and more, and we're not really resolving it. We take them to jail for 4 to 8 hours and release them. That's not a path that's going to help either. So that ability to really resolve some of these issues is not short term. What I've been told and what we have done in some areas, Chinatown, in that area, we've upped our presence in that area, foot patrols, and the response we've gotten back from the business owners have been very, very positive. And this is a recent thing we've done in the last 3 weeks. Of course, the Byward Market will see that. Our presence does help. Our presence does help the feeling of security, and we do keep the tension down with some of the social behaviors that are concerning people. And it's probably something we need to do more of. However, that is resource intense, and it's something that we are looking at doing. And Deputy Burnett, I spoke a little bit more on this than I was going to initially, but do you want to add a little bit more to Member Curry's comments?
Yeah, I would say that, the core initiative that we currently have in place is exactly that. We have all the social services at the table to deal with some of those individuals. Now, I would break it into two parts. You have those people that have social issues, don't have a place to stay, and then you have criminal issues, which, the chief has indicated we're more than happy to deal with. It's just those homeless people, those people that don't have a place to stay and have drug addiction. How do we manage that? So we do work very closely with our social services to identify places and how to solve their issues. It's just so abundant in the market, like the chief indicated.
So thank you for that. I mean, I see the challenges for sure. My one question, though, I think that we didn't touch on here was, do we have the technology to identify a particular resident that we are having, maybe 15 interactions with in a course of a half a day? Are we able to track that right now with the technology we have?
I think the short answer is yes. Yes, we do have the technology. We do have the systems that will identify all the information around it and then percolate the person up who is a challenge for us.
Right. Okay, good
And
to know.
that's something we are working on, like in terms of those prolific offenders and our neighborhood resource teams in the individual wards, using our data to identify prolific offenders who are we deal with them on a regular basis, whether it's criminal or social disorder, and trying to strategize on how to deal with them. And sometimes that's charging them, getting them into the justice system, or if there is a path we can take with the social agencies, we can do that as well too. But that's part of what our program is. In terms of targeting those high volume folks that we deal with. And maybe Paul, you're going to wrap that up?
Yeah, I would just say, old school policing where we have the same officers working in the same areas that are very familiar with the same players, and that communication amongst different platoons, amongst individuals that work on their platoon, they do know the individuals that they're dealing with on a continuous basis.
Okay, great. Fair enough. If Deputy Bell, if you want to continue with Councillor Carr's comments, you don't forget those, and I'll just go back to my last 2 points after that.
No, I'm good. I jotted some notes, so they're actually committed now. So if you want to keep going, I'm good either way.
Okay, well, I don't know if Councillor Carr wants to maybe get her answers quickly. No? Okay, well, I'll just go with my next two then. We also at this conference, I tell you, this was an excellent conference. We learned that the technology, again, where store owners will be able to embed a tracking device into, like, where we've had at malls out in the West End, people going in and grabbing like an entire rack of jeans, say, and running. That police now will not need to be called to deal with all of the aftermath of that, but will simply be able to track where the jeans are and be able to go to the location where all of those jeans are now sitting because there is a tracking device. That type of technology, as shop owners become, embrace that technology, that is one of the examples where, we will be more effective and efficient. But I'm wondering, will that add or require additional technology for us or an additional unit, or will that create another change that we are not ready for in terms of our budget?
So I think you actually ended on where I wanted to begin in terms of that answer. At the end of every piece of technology that we have, there is still a person that needs to do something and interact with other people to put in front of the court system. So we have that now through air tags. People put air tags on things and we are able to follow them around and track them. So every time we build a technology capability, we actually have to look at the financial impacts first of all, but then the resource impacts to help support it. So technology can offset some of our work, but often it actually increases some of different areas of our work as well. So we continually look to develop better investigative and operational technology strategies, but are really clearly focused on how does that impact the resources we have, because not every investment takes away the need to have people invested in it. So body-worn cameras is a great example of that. So that is something we're conscious of and look at while we try and bring on these new technologies to support our operations.
Great. Thanks for that. And just as a very quick comment on the body-worn cameras, I was learning too that people with body-worn cameras, a person can give their statement right into the camera right now, and that will actually save a lot of time and visit and driving and, recording. So I just want to make that comment that there's some that will help, some that will, as you say, create other costs. My last thing is just a comment. So Chief, I'm so glad you went and visited with every city councillor and the business owners. That data is very helpful for us when we sit at city council. I'm really just speaking on behalf of the city councillors here. We sit at the budget table when it comes down to the final budget. And we understand what the feedback has been from our colleagues, that they almost unanimously have said that they would like to see more police in their wards. Very helpful because, you know, I'd like to see a unanimous vote on the police services budget. And we shall see, but it is very helpful for us to have that information and good for you to get out and drive around those wards and talk to city councilors and see the jurisdiction. So I really appreciate that. And I think that will help us when it comes to looking at the budget at the end of the day at city council. So thank you very much for all of this.
Thank you, Member Curry. Does any other member of the board want to make any comments to the presentation?
Chair, can I actually go back and have a discussion around Councillor Carr's, Member Carr's comments?
Good call. Sorry about that. Yes, please do.
So Member Carr, sorry I didn't jump in at the time. I think you've raised some really, really important points in terms of longer term funding around longer term implementation programs. So one of the things that we've been talking about as a command team and look forward to discussing with the FAC is how do we actually develop a longer term financial plan that actually sustains those? You talked about the audit. Well, the audit, we know with the outdated numbers that we have around our deployment, will ultimately identify a number of people that we're going to need to increase on our frontline resources. Our body-worn cameras, we know, super effective and very important tool, but quite expensive to actually implement, manage, and maintain. We know there's going to be investments around our district. We know that we have a facility strategic plan coming up. So there's a bunch of these inputs that we see coming. And what we're going to propose to FAC to do is through 2026 work on a 4-year financial strategy for the police service that will be tabled with the new board and the new council to identify here's the key strategic areas that we know we need to focus on that will require investment. And here's how we propose to fund them over a 4-year period. What we want to start to get away from is lurching from budget to budget to try and fund longer term programs and plans. So we're open to any feedback as we move along from the FAC and the board overall, but we think it's a more sustainable, more prudent approach to take to look at the longer term financial planning for the police service over the next number of years.
And I'm just going to add on the end of that what Deputy Bell said. This sort of idea of doing this, as you know, every year we just sort of grind in terms of what is for the next year, and that long-term vision that Member Carr that you outlined is something that we want to see. And it was based on something that I saw with the London Police Service here in Ontario. In speaking with the chief, when he got hired, the board decided that they wanted to sort of right size that organization in terms of the funding. They were sort of at the bottom of the Big 12 for budget increases for a number of years, along with us and sort of Durham, and so they challenged the chief to present a 4-year package that they could look at, and so in I think it's 24, 25, 6, and 7. At the end of the day, it's 34 point something % is what they approved. Every year it has to go to the council for approval, but the board sort of approved that package. So that was something that I just brought forward into the city here in terms of a potential just to have more cost certainty for policing over this. And of course, it's too late to do that for the 26 budget, but the thought is for then for the new after election in 26, for that whole mandate, 27, 28, 29, and 30, there would be some cost certainty for the policing rate that the board would see that then would be very transparent to the 24 councillors and the mayor of what that might look like. Thank you.
Chief. Chair Fakarani.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to say thank you to the OPS for the presentation. Chair, I think it was a really good discussion so far on the budget. So thank you to all the colleagues. For me, the two issues that stand out, one the Chief just mentioned, is the long-term forecast budgeting. I think as we move forward, that's going to be very critical and very important, and I think very healthy for the organization. So I'm very glad to see that there's some movement on that. And the second thing is the efficiencies. I'm very pleased to see the targeted efficiencies, the areas that will be targeted to find some efficiencies. So I just want to thank the service and you, the chair, for this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My comments on it is basically to commend Deputy Chief Bell and his staff for putting this presentation together. I think the highlights for me are the fact that there's a more detailed approach to efficiencies, the ongoing conversations with the city to see how we can align our needs with what the recommendations were, and the 4-year plan. I think those are all really strong initiatives. I think one of the things that's been disturbing is that for the 2025 budget book, there was a forecast incorporated of what the expectation would be in 2026. But I think we develop a full 4-year plan where we can get the board to approve the increases over that 4-year period. I think it'll go a lot better as far as developing that approach and making sure that everybody's aware of what the ongoing expenses are that to provide effective policing in the city of Ottawa. So, Chief, thank you to you and Deputy Bell and the staff involved for this presentation. I'd like to ask that the Ottawa Police Service Board Finance Committee receive this item for information. Is the item received?
Received.
This concludes our items of business. Our next meeting will be Friday, October 10th, 2025 at 10 a.m. Can I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.